The rain didn't fall in Port Argyll, it attacked. It came down in cold, slanted sheets that hammered the industrial lakefront, turning the neon glow of the city into a watercolor bleed of electric blues and chemical greens. Below the elevated freeways, steam rose from the grates, smelling of rust and wet cement. The only beacon of warmth in the entire district was the Gilded Coyote, a club that sat sleek and defiant against the skyline, its windows glowing like amber. It was an oasis, and like all oases in this city, it was owned by the Valerio Syndicate. Inside, the base was a physical presence, a heartbeat beneath the floorboards. Mara Quinones, 23 years old, moved through the pulse of it with a practiced economy of motion. Her official title was bartender, but on nights when the crowd was thick and the tips were thin, the job description expanded. She would step onto one of the small, elevated platforms behind the bar, her movements less a dance and more a display of controlled calisthenics, a fluid show of strength that held the patrons' attention just long enough for them to order another round. Every shift was a calculation. Every smile was currency. She was here for one reason: Rosa Quinones, her mother, whose kidneys were failing her in stages, a slow, agonizing decline. Rosa was on the dialysis wait list, a list that seemed more theoretical than real, and the hospital bills from St. Helena Medical Center were piling up like snowdrifts. Mara worked the night shift, the late shift, the double shift, any shift that paid. She lived by 3 rules. 1, never accept a drink from a customer. 2, never follow a customer to the parking lot, no matter the promise of a tip. 3, never, ever take off the thin silver chain around her neck. It looked like a simple trinket, but tucked beneath her uniform, it held a small, dull key, the only key to the medicine cabinet back in their apartment, the cabinet that held her mother's precious, rationed pharmaceuticals. High above the noise, the smoke, and the sweat, Cassian Vale watched. At 35, Cassian was the undisputed boss of the Valerio operations. He did not sit in the VIP booths, accepting tribute and shaking hands. He sat in the Aegis room, a dark, soundproofed cylinder of one-way glass and tactical monitors that overlooked the entire club. He saw every transaction, every glance, every hand that lingered too long on a waitress's arm. His security system was less about bouncers and more about data. His reputation was built on cold logic. The internal purge 3 years prior had been brutal, swift and clean, removing 3 capos who had mistaken his quiet nature for weakness. He had cemented his control not with bullets, but with information. He didn't smoke. He didn't raise his voice. While his predecessors favored cigars and whiskey, Cassian Vale favored silence, black coffee, and a heavy, piston-filled fountain pen. He was using it now, making notes in a leather-bound ledger. He remembered every face that worked for him. Tonight, his focus settled on the main bar. A heavy-set man in an expensive suit, his face flushed with liquor, was leaning over the counter, his hand gripping Mara's wrist. He was loud, demanding something stronger, something worth his time. Mara didn't pull away. Cassian's finger hovered over the silent alert on his console. But Mara didn't panic. She smiled, a tight, professional brightness, and leaned in just enough to be heard over the music. "I have something special," she said, her voice smooth. "Top shelf, but it's subtle. It's not about the burn. It's about the finish." The man grunted, releasing her. Mara turned, her back to him, her movements quick. She built the drink with a flourish shaker. Ice, a pour from a premium-looking bottle, a twist of lime zested with theatrical flair. She placed the elaborate mocktail in front of him. It was brightly colored, expertly layered, and contained exactly 0% alcohol. "On the house, for a man who knows quality," she said. The man drank it, nodded in appreciation of the perceived status, and tossed a $50 bill onto the bar. He left her alone. In the Aegis room, Cassian Vale stopped writing. He watched her discreetly wipe the man's spittle from her wrist before turning to the next customer, her expression unchanged. He made a new note in his ledger. A single word: controlled. It was the first time he had truly seen her. The tension on the floor was mirrored by the rumors circulating in the back hallways, the Novak Brotherhood. Valerio's grittier, more chaotic rivals were making noise. They were leaning on the small businesses and residents down at Pier 12, the old harbor district, demanding protection money the locals couldn't afford. The air in the city was growing static. Cashin picked up his internal phone. His voice, when it came, was low and clear, piped directly to his floor manager and security leads. "Silver screen is active," he ordered. It was his standing command. All conflicts with clientele were to be de-escalated with smiles. All aggression was to be absorbed, documented, and handled by the system's ears. The dozens of high-fidelity microphones filtering noise to the Aegis room. There would be no brawls, no broken bottles, no fists. The Gilded Coyote was a place of class. Cashin Vale heard everything, and he would decide later, in the quiet, precisely how to respond. He looked down at the floor, his gaze finding Mara Quinones once more as she expertly poured 3 beers at once, the key on its chain hidden just beneath her collar. Mara hated the world she worked in. She hated the smell of stale liquor, the synthetic cherry of flavored vodka, and the thick sweetness of the smoke machines. But it was a dull hatred, a low-grade annoyance compared to the sharp, metallic fear she felt when she walked into St. Helena Medical Center. The hospital corridors were too bright, smelling of antiseptic and despair. The administrator in the billing department didn't even look up from her computer. "The account for Rosa Quinones is in arrears. Miss Quinones, we flagged her file for review." Mara knew what review meant. It meant removal. If she missed the payment cutoff this week, her mother would be taken off the active transplant list. It was that simple. They would let her mother die over a few $1,000s. To make matters worse, the private surgeon, the only one willing to attempt the high-risk transplant, now required a new, separate deposit just to keep her mother on his surgical schedule. The money from the Gilded Coyote wasn't just for medicine anymore. It was ransom. Her life was a relentless, interlocking schedule of exhaustion. She finished her shift at the Coyote at 3 a.m., catching the last run of the number 7 bus toward the hospital district. She would sit in the back, her heavy EMT textbook open in her lap, the pages illuminated by the passing streetlights. She always seemed to be stuck on the chapter detailing hypovolemic shock. She'd read the same paragraph 6 times, the words blurring, before her head would inevitably drop, her cheek pressed against the cold, vibrating window. She'd steal 20 minutes of sleep before the bus reached her stop, then walk the 6 blocks to her mother's apartment to check her vitals and administer her morning medications before catching another bus to her 8 a.m. emergency medical technician class. She was back at the club that night, running on caffeine and sheer willpower. When Val slid up beside her at the bar, Val, the club's DJ and Mara's only friend in this place, kept their eyes on their turntables, their voice pitched low. "You need to be careful, ma'am," Val said, seamlessly mixing 2 tracks. "You've got to watch her." Mara didn't look up from polishing a glass. "It's a club, Val. Everyone's watching everyone." "Not like this," Val insisted. "Glass booth, top floor. He hasn't looked away from your station for an hour." Mara finally glanced up, squinting through the manufactured fog at the dark pane of one-way glass high above the floor. "That's just management. Probably worried I'm overpouring." "That's not management," Val said grimly. "That's Vale, the big boss. He never watches the floor." Mara felt a cold prickle on her neck, but she forced a shrug. "He's got better things to do. I'm just part of the scenery." "Just be careful," Val said, sliding a new record into place. "Scenery doesn't usually get stared at that hard." An hour later, a man sat down at her bar. He was different from the usual clientele. He wore a rumpled suit that looked cheap but durable, and his shoes were scuffed. He ordered a club soda with lime and paid in exact change. He nursed it, watching, but not in the way men usually watched her. He was studying the room. When Mara came by to clear his glass, he flashed a badge discreetly below the bar top, Aiden Pike, Federal Bureau of Maritime Integrity. Mara's blood ran cold. Cops. We don't want any trouble here, sir. I'm sure you don't, Pike said, his voice flat. I'm looking into Valerio's shipping manifests. Specifically, the frozen food containers they're moving through Pier 12. You've been here a while. You seem smart. Maybe you've heard the staff talking about shipments. Mara's professional smile clicked into place, a rigid mask. Sir, I just pour the drinks. I don't listen to rumors. Is there anything else I can get you? Pike stared at her for a long moment. A girl like you, working in a place like this, trying to take care of her mom. He knew about her mother. The room suddenly felt very small. We can help you. There are programs. I don't need any help, Mara said, her voice sharp. But thank you for your business. She turned and walked away, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the Aegis room, Cash and Vale watched the interaction on a high-definition monitor. He zoomed in, reading the agent's lips. He saw the flash of the badge. He saw Mara's refusal, the stiff set of her shoulders as she walked away. He picked up his fountain pen and made a neat entry in his ledger. Keeps to herself. The night spiraled. A storm broke over Port Argyle, and the club's power flickered twice. In that moment of near darkness, the front doors burst open, and 3 men stumbled in, shouting and shoving. They wore the colors of the Novak Brotherhood. It was a blatant provocation, a test. Before the security bouncers could even react, 4 men in dark suits, the internal Aegis team, materialized from the shadows. There was no brawl. It was a silent, brutal ballet. One moment the Novak men were posturing, the next they were being efficiently neutralized and propelled back out into the street, their feet barely touching the ground. It was over in less than 30 seconds. No one threw a punch. No one left a mark. By the time Mara's shift ended, the storm was raging, a mix of freezing rain and sleet. The streetlights were flickering, and she knew the buses would be delayed, if they were running at all. She pulled her thin coat tight and stepped out the staff exit into the alley, bracing for the long, cold walk. A black sedan was waiting, its engine humming quietly. The driver, a man she recognized from the Aegis team, stepped out and opened the rear door. Miss Quinones, the bridges are icing over. I'm to see you home. Mara stopped, her hand tightening on her bag. I can't pay for that. There's no charge. Mr. Vale's orders. The name again. It wasn't a request. It was a command, wrapped in the veneer of courtesy. She looked down the dark, empty street, the sleet stinging her face. She got in the car. The ride was silent, the interior warm and smelling faintly of leather. The driver didn't speak. She felt less rescued and more captured. He dropped her at the corner of her street, not waiting to watch her go into the dilapidated tenement building. She hurried up the stairs, fumbling for her keys, her mind reeling from the agent, the fight, and the terrifyingly polite driver. She pushed her apartment door open. The apartment was quiet. Rosa was sleeping fitfully in the other room. Everything was as she had left it, except for the plain white envelope on her kitchen counter. It had no name, no note. She tore it open, her fingers numb. Inside was a thick stack of $100 bills. She counted it, her breath catching in her throat. It was exactly the amount she needed to pay the hospital, to the dollar. A terrifying, specific act of generosity. She sank onto a kitchen chair, the money clutched in her hand. She was being watched. She was being tested. And now, she was being paid for. The envelope felt heavy in her hand, not just with the weight of the cash, but with the weight of the obligation it represented. Mara stormed into her shift the next night and cornered the night manager, a perpetually stressed man named Sal, in the back office. She threw the envelope onto his desk. I don't know who this is from, Sal, but I can't take it. This isn't a tip. Sal didn't flinch. He pushed the envelope back toward her, his expression weary. Take it. Mara. It's the Employee Assistance Fund. We take care of our own. There's no such fund, she shot back. I've read the handbook. It's a discretionary fund, Sal said, his gaze dropping to his keyboard. From senior management, they noticed you were working doubles. Don't ask questions, just use it for what you need. And what do they expect in return? Her voice was low. Sal finally looked at her, his eyes empty of everything but exhaustion. They expect you to show up for your shift. Go on, get out there. The bars backed up. She took the money, feeling dirty, but that feeling was nothing compared to the desolation she felt 2 days later at St. Helena. Her mother, small and pale, was shivering under a thin hospital blanket, utterly depleted from her dialysis session. The nurse spoke in a hushed, clinical tone. Her red blood cell count is dangerously low, and she's severely dehydrated. We need to start a course of EPO injections and supplement with IV fluids, but her insurance is rejecting the coverage for the EPO. The nurse handed her the prescription. The cost was astronomical. It was also non-negotiable. That night, Mara accepted another envelope left silently on her locker. This time, she didn't try to return it. She used the cash to buy the vials of Epigen and the bags of saline, her stomach churning with a mixture of gratitude and self-loathing. In the Aegis room, Cassian Vale closed Mara's human resources file. He had read it 3 times. It was the detail about her past that had snagged his attention. She wasn't just a bartender. 4 years ago, she'd been a state-level track athlete. She had won the 400-meter hurdles, a grueling race of speed and endurance. She had a full scholarship to a state university, which she abandoned after her sophomore year. The reason listed, family financial crisis. Cassian understood that. He understood the sudden, brutal realignment of a life, the moment when all your choices are taken away by the failings of others. He had been trained by a tyrannical father to be a weapon, his own ambitions filed down to a sharp point. He saw in her file not a victim, but a survivor who had been forced to trade a running track for a liquor-soaked bar. It resonated with a cold, dormant part of him. His observation became more focused. He watched her protect her own. Val, the DJ, was pale and shaking when they found Mara by the ice machine. "Mara, I messed up. I messed up bad." Val held up their phone. They had posted an angry, anonymous story on social media about a Novak-owned business shortchanging its staff, complete with a picture of the storefront. "Someone recognized the location. They sent me a message. They know where I work." Mara's eyes went hard. She didn't scold Val. She grabbed the phone, her fingers flying across the screen. She deleted the post, then deleted the account. "Who saw you post it?" "Just Sal might have seen me on my phone in the booth." Mara nodded once. "Go back to work. Don't say anything." Mara went straight to Sal's office. "It was me," she said, her voice flat. "I was on my phone in the booth, messing with Val's setup. I posted something stupid about a rival club. It's deleted. It won't happen again. Dock my pay if you have to." Sal sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just stay off the socials. Quinones, I don't need the headache." Cassian watched the entire exchange through the audio feeds. Mara had taken the hit, shielding her friend without a second thought. It was a loyalty that was rare, and in his world, dangerously valuable. The federal agent, Aiden Pike, found her outside her EMT class. This time, he wasn't pretending to be a customer. "You were smart to walk away in the club," he said, falling into step beside her. "But you're in over your head. I'm not just FBMI. I'm part of an interagency task group. We're running a major operation, and we're going to squeeze Valerio and the Novaks at the same time." Mara kept walking, her gaze fixed ahead. "I told you, I don't know anything." "I don't care what you know," Pike said, his voice hardening. "I care about what you can see. Cassian Vale is watching you. You're an interest of his. That makes you a potential asset. He offered the deal. We can put you and your mother in protective custody, a new city, full medical care, a clean slate. All you have to do is listen. Tell us what you see. Wear a wire." Mara stopped, her breath catching. A new city. Full medical. Rosa would be safe. The weight of her life, the crushing pressure almost made her buckle. She could say yes. She could be free. "And how long?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Would my mother be in protective custody? How do you move a woman who needs a dialysis machine 3 times a week? What happens if you can't get her to a clinic in time? Pike's expression tightened. There are logistics. We'd handle it. You'd handle it, Mara repeated, the hope dying as quickly as it had flared. You can't guarantee her safety. You just see her as bait. Leave me alone. She turned and walked away, the weight of her mother's life settling back onto her shoulders. That night, she felt it. After her shift, she walked her usual route to the bus stop, but the rain had stopped, and the silence of the streets was different. It was heavy. She heard a footstep behind her, too close, then another. 2 men, shadows detaching themselves from an alley, walking in perfect time with her. Her heart leaped into her throat. She gripped the key on her necklace. She thought of Pike. She thought of the Novaks. She quickened her pace. They quickened theirs. They were 20 yards behind her when a car door slammed shut on a side street, loud as a gunshot in the dead of night quiet. A voice, rough, shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" The 2 men behind her froze. They looked at each other, then scrambled back into the alley they had come from. Mara spun around, but there was no one there. The side street was empty. The car was gone. It wasn't a rescue. It was a message. An invisible hand had swept the pieces off the board. She was protected. She was owned. The gratitude was suffocating, but the fear was sharper. She couldn't be a puppet. She couldn't live with this invisible, suffocating care. She had to know. She had to see the puppeteer. The next night, in the staff locker room, she set her trap. She took out her phone and typed a new text message, addressed to an unsaved number. "Pike, I'll meet you. After my shift. Same place you found me this morning. I'll tell you what I know." She left the phone on the bench, the screen illuminated, and walked to the sinks at the far end of the room. In the mirror, she watched the hallway. High in the corner, a black security camera dome was mounted to the ceiling. She counted to 10. The camera, which had been pointing straight down the hall, swiveled, its internal mechanism making an almost soundless whir. It angled down, focusing directly on the locker room bench, on the illuminated screen of her phone. Mara stared at her own reflection, her face pale. The lens was black, opaque, just like the glass of the Aegis room. He knew. It happened at exactly 1:05 in the morning. One moment, the Gilded Coyote was a roaring ocean of sound and light. The next, it was plunged into absolute darkness and a silence so profound it was deafening. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by nervous laughter. Then, a second later, the emergency systems kicked in. Moss green backup lights flickered on, casting the entire club in an eerie, aquatic glow. The music was dead. The cash registers were dark. Mara caught wiping down the bar, froze. In the strange new light, the patrons looked like pale, anxious ghosts. The security team was already moving, their forms dark shadows against the green. And then, she saw him. He wasn't in the glass room, and he was on the floor. He moved with an unsettling lack of urgency, as if he were just another patron, walking calmly from the main staircase. Cassian Vale. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, no tie, the top button of his white shirt undone. He looked like he was walking through a boardroom, not a panicked club. He stopped beside her, his gaze sweeping the area behind her bar. His voice was low, pitched to be heard only by her, yet it cut through the nervous murmuring of the crowd. "Stay still, Mara." She hadn't realized she was tense to move. Hearing him say her name felt like a small electric shock. "In the dark, it's easy to step on broken glass," he continued, his eyes still scanning. He was checking sightlines, exits, and threats. It was all a pretext. There was no broken glass. Just as she was about to challenge him, the main generators roared to life. The full, bright lights of the club flooded the room, painfully white after the green, and the sound system hissed back on before Val smartly cut it to low-volume jazz. Mara blinked, and when her eyes adjusted, she got her first clear look at him. He was not what she had imagined. The rumors painted him as a shadow, a brute, a monster. The man standing 3 feet from her was none of those. He was lean, his features sharp, and his dark hair was meticulously neat, but it was his eyes. They were a flat, calm gray, and they held an intelligence that was far more dangerous than any street thug's posturing. He was, she realized with a jolt, a man who was entirely, terrifyingly, in control. "Everything seems secure," he said, finally looking at her. The adrenaline from the blackout, mixed with the anger from her locker room discovery, made her reckless. "What gives you the right?" she asked, her voice tight. His expression didn't flicker. The right to what? To decide, to watch, to decide who follows me home, or when my shift is over, or what I'm allowed to see. He regarded her for a long moment, not offended, just analytical. "My responsibility, Miss Quinones, is to ensure everyone who works for me gets home intact. Your methods of communication are your own business. Your safety is mine." He had just admitted it, admitted to the text, the surveillance, the invisible net she was trapped in. "I have a new opening," he said, seamlessly changing the subject. "The private events lounge on the mezzanine. It's cleaner work, better clientele. The tips are significant. The position is yours, if you want it." She saw the offer for what it was, a gilded cage, a promotion that would move her from the public floor to his private domain, 1 floor closer to the Aegis room. It was a test. "Thank you, Mr. Vale," she said, her voice steady, "but I'm fine where I am. I like the light down here." A flicker of something surprised respect passed through his eyes. "As you wish." He gave a single, sharp nod and was gone, disappearing into the crowd before the security manager even reached the bar. The rest of the night was tense. The Novaks were blamed for the power surge, an act of electronic sabotage. The rivalry was escalating. The proof came 2 days later. Val showed her the video during their pre-shift setup. "They posted this everywhere. Mara, it's disgusting." It was footage of one of the younger waitresses from the Coyote, filmed secretly in an alley after her shift. She was clearly intoxicated, and 2 men, their faces blurred but their voices full of taunts, were harassing her, pushing her until she fell into a pile of garbage. It was a calculated act of humiliation, designed to show that Valerio couldn't protect his own. The staff was buzzing with anger and fear. When Cassian arrived, he didn't use the back stairs. He walked through the main employee entrance. He called a 5-minute staff meeting, his voice never rising. He stood in the center of the briefing room. "You have all seen the video. This was an act of cowardice by the Novak Brotherhood. It will be handled." "What are you gonna do, boss?" one of the bouncers called out. Cassian's gaze found the bouncer. "It will be handled cleanly," he said, his voice dropping. "And without noise, they wanted a public spectacle. They will not get one." He looked at the staff, one by one. "You are all dismissed. Silver screen protocols are in full effect tonight. Later." Mara was wiping down her station when she saw him leaving through the main entrance. The rain had started again, cold and relentless. He wasn't flanked by bodyguards. He wore a simple, dark wool coat, his hands in his pockets. He paused on the sidewalk, looked up into the storm, and then simply walked into it. A lone, calm figure disappearing into the wet darkness. That image, his stillness, his absolute lack of visible fear, his solitary resolve shook her more than the blackout. He wasn't a coward hiding behind glass. He was the storm itself. That night, from the ancient public library computer, she logged into a new, anonymous email account. She sent a single message to the general administrative address for the Valerio group, knowing he would see it. The subject line was blank. The message had only 9 words. "Thank you for the safe walk home the other night." She hit send, severing the connection, and for the first time, she had voluntarily reached through the glass. The air over Port Argyle grew thin and sharp. The Federal Bureau of Maritime Integrity, bolstered by the newly formed Interagency Task Group, officially launched Operation Harbor Sweep. On paper, It was a broad crackdown on illegal cargo and shipping fraud originating from Pier 12. In reality, it was a pincer move. The Novaks were the public target. But Aiden Pike's true prize was Cassian Vale. Pike was convinced Valerio was moving illicit goods under the cover of the frozen foods shipping company. He just needed a way inside, and he believed Mara Quinones was his key. The leverage came on a cold Tuesday night. Mara was setting up her bar, the club still an hour from opening, when her phone vibrated. It was a text from Val. "Help back alley now." Mara's blood turned to ice. She didn't alert security. She didn't tell Sal. She simply dropped her rag and ran, bursting through the staff exit into the loading dock. The alley was empty, save for Val's phone, its screen shattered on the wet pavement. As she bent to pick it up, her own phone buzzed again. An unknown number. "Your friend is safe, for now. We need a small favor. There is a janitorial key in the back office, the one for the third-floor utility closet. Bring it to the roof of the warehouse at Pier 12, Yard 4. Come alone. You have 30 minutes. Mara's mind raced. The third-floor utility closet was nothing, just mops and bleach, but she knew the club's layout. It shared a wall with the building's central server room. This wasn't about cleaning supplies. This was about access. She didn't hesitate. She ran back inside, into Sal's unlocked office, and grabbed the heavy ring of keys from the wall hook. She found the one labeled U3 and sprinted back out into the night. She was the bait, and she had taken it. High above, in the Aegis room, the mood was arctic. "Sir," Cassian's chief analyst said, his voice tight. "We have a situation. Val, the DJ, was forced into a vehicle registered to a Novak front company 4 minutes ago, and Quinones just left the building, running. She has the key for the third-floor utility closet." Cassian's eyes narrowed. "It's Pike," he said, his voice flat. "He's using the Novaks as his muscle, or he's using their feud as cover. They aren't after the key. They are after her. She's the leverage." He didn't slam his fist. He didn't shout for his men. His fingers moved with precise speed across his control console. "Reroute all external camera feeds from Pier 12, Yard 4, to my private monitor. Initiate a sequential lockdown on all magnetic gates in the district, but do not engage them yet. And—" He paused, his finger hovering over a specific command. "Activate Code Rose for the club." "Sir, that's a non-violent protocol." "Do it." In the main club, the low lights began to shift, the amber glow behind the bottles, the blue lights tracing the stairs. All of it slowly faded, replaced by a deep, subtle, pinkish hue. It was the signal for a high-level asset in compromise. It meant do not intervene. Do not engage, observe, and hold. Mara ran the 6 blocks to the pier, the metal key digging a painful groove into her palm. The wind off the lake was a physical blow, tearing at her jacket. She found Yard 4, a maze of stacked shipping containers, and located the steel ladder on the side of the main warehouse. She climbed, her lungs burning, and hauled herself over the edge onto the flat, gravel-covered roof. Val wasn't there. Aiden Pike stepped out from behind a large air conditioning unit, his face grim. "I knew you'd come, Mara," he said. "Where is Val?" she demanded, her voice raw. "My team is debriefing them," Pike said, his tone dismissive. "They're fine. I'm sorry for the theatrics. The Novaks think they're doing me a favor, and I let them. It was the only way to get you here, away from Vale's cameras." He held up a small, black device, a high-frequency transmitter. "I need you to take this back to the club. The key you have opens the closet. Plant this on the server room door. It will give my team a back door to Vale's entire system. We can finally see what he's shipping." Rage, cold and pure, washed over Mara. You endangered Val's life. You kidnapped my friend. You're using me to plant a bug." "I'm doing what's necessary," Pike spat, his frustration showing. "He's a criminal, Mara, and right now, you're an asset. Sometimes assets get burned to catch the bigger target." "She's not an asset." The voice came from the stairwell door, not 10 feet away. Cassian Vale emerged from the shadows. He was wearing his dark wool coat, his hands empty. He looked completely, unnervingly calm. Pike spun, his hand dropping to the gun on his hip, but he didn't draw. "Vale, this is a federal operation. You are interfering." Cassian advanced slowly, stopping halfway between Pike and Mara. He never took his eyes off the agent. "This is my labor. Agent Pike," he said, his voice a low, cold blade. "You do not have the right to take my property." The words hit Mara with the force of a slap. "I am not your property," she shouted, her voice breaking with fury. "I am not a piece of labor or a thing for you to own." For the first time, Cassian's gaze shifted to her. The coldness in his eyes dissipated, replaced by something complex and heavy. "No," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "You are not. But I am responsible if you are harmed, and I will not allow that." He turned back to Pike. "You have compromised my employee. You have trespassed on my property, and you have allied yourself with the Novaks to do it, which makes you either a fool or a criminal. You are sloppy." "This is entrapment," Pike blustered. "This is a private property dispute," Cassian countered smoothly, "and you are losing." From the yard below, a series of heavy, metallic thuds echoed as the magnetic locks on the perimeter gates engaged one by one. Pike was sealed in. "Let Val go," Mara said, her voice shaking but firm. Pike looked at Cassian, then at Mara. He was outmaneuvered. He snatched his radio from his belt. "All units, stand down. Release the DJ. I repeat, release them. Now." A moment later, Val's terrified voice crackled over the radio. "Mara, I'm out. They let me go. I'm on the street." Pike glared at Cassian, his face a mask of defeat. "This isn't over, Vale. You might be clean enough to walk around, but you're not clean for good. Your prosecutorial window is closing. One day, you will make a mistake." "Then you should wait for that day," Cassian said. He gestured to the stairwell. "Leave." Pike hesitated, a snarl on his lips, then brushed past Cassian and disappeared down the stairs. Mara stood alone on the rooftop, shivering violently. The key was still in her hand. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a cold, terrifying emptiness. Cassian watched her, his expression unreadable in the dim orange light of the pier. He had saved her. He had also, in 3 words, claimed her. He didn't move toward her. He didn't offer his coat. He didn't tell her it was okay. He just stood, waiting. He had removed the threat, but he did not presume to take her with it. He was, once again, placing the choice entirely in her hands. She couldn't look at him. She turned, her heart a tangled knot of fear and a strange, unwelcome gratitude, and descended the ladder back to the world she knew. She worked the entire shift in a daze, haunted by the memory of the rooftop, by his voice, by his terrifying, passive protection. When her shift ended at 3 a.m, the world had changed. A freak snowstorm, arriving early in the season, had descended on Port Argyle, choking the city in a matter of hours. The rain had turned to sleet, and the sleet had turned to thick, heavy snow that clung to every surface. The club was almost empty. The city had shut down. No taxis were running. The screens above the bar showed the bridges were closed, the buses suspended. She was stranded. She pulled on her thin coat, her mind racing. She could sleep in the locker room, but the thought of being trapped in his building was suffocating. She stepped out the staff exit into the alley, bracing for the wind, only to find the black sedan waiting, its engine a low thrum in the muffled silence. But it was not the driver who stepped out. Cassian Vale rounded the hood of the car, his wool coat dusted with snow. He stopped a few feet from her. "The city is closed. Mara, I'm taking you home." "You don't have to do that." "I do," he said. It wasn't an argument. He opened the passenger door for her. This time, she got in. He drove with a focused, silent competence. The heavy sedan handled the ice better than most cars, but the streets were treacherous. The only sound was the rhythmic thwack-thwump of the windshield wipers fighting the accumulating snow. They made it to the overpass that led to her district when the car in front of them, a small economy car, spun in a slow, lazy circle and slammed into the median. Cassian stopped, his tires spinning for a moment before gripping the ice. They were stuck. Ahead, the bridge was a parking lot of flashing hazards and blocked lanes. Behind them, the on-ramp was already gridlocked. "We aren't moving for hours," he said, his voice flat. He looked not at her, but at the hotel that stood at the base of the overpass, the Brass Lantern. It was an old, historic building, dark save for a few lights on the ground floor. Valerio had just acquired it 2 months ago. "We'll wait it out there," he said. "It's safer than staying on the ice." He led her down the embankment, the snow up to their knees, and across the empty street. He used a key from his own ring to open the heavy brass and glass doors. The lobby was vast, dark and cold, smelling of dust and old velvet, but in the back, a massive stone fireplace had a pilot light glowing. He knelt, turning a valve, and with a soft whoosh, a fire roared to life, casting the room in a warm, golden light. He disappeared for a moment and returned with 2 thick blankets from a storage closet. He handed one to her, his fingers brushing hers. She flinched, and he immediately drew back, taking a seat in an armchair several feet away. Mara wrapped the blanket around her shivering shoulders. The shiver was not just from the cold, it was him. The silence in the vast room was heavier than the snow outside. "My father," he said, his voice quiet, startling her. He was staring into the flames. He believed emotion was a weakness, a flaw in the design. He didn't raise a son. He forged a tool. He trained me to observe, to analyze and to act, but never to feel. He was giving her the truth, unasked. Mara watched his profile in the firelight, the man who saw everything. "I used to practice hurdles at an abandoned stadium," she said, her own voice barely a whisper. "My mother worked the concession stands during games when she was healthy. I'd spend all day there. I'd pretend the cracked concrete and rusted fences were an Olympic track. I learned to run, to jump, to clear any obstacle without breaking stride. It was my own training." He turned to look at her, really look at her, the analytical gray of his eyes softening. "We were both trained for survival, then," he said, "just in different arenas." She was trembling, a deep, uncontrollable tremor. It was the cold, the exhaustion, the fear, and the sudden, raw honesty from this impossible man. He saw her shiver, but he did not move. He kept his distance, his hands resting on the arms of his chair. He was waiting, giving her the choice. She couldn't bear the distance. She stood, the blanket pooling at her feet, and took the 2 steps that separated them. She stopped directly in front of him, slowly, as if testing a theory. She lifted her hand and placed it flat on his chest, over his heart. Beneath her palm, she felt it, a slow, steady, powerful beat, solid as the foundation of the building. He didn't move, didn't breathe. He just watched her. "Do you want this?" he asked, his voice rough. She didn't trust her voice. She just nodded, her eyes locked on his. He stood, but so slowly she barely registered the movement. He didn't reach for her. Instead, he lifted one hand and laid his fingers gently against the side of her neck, his thumb tracing the delicate line of her collarbone. The touch was feather-light, inquisitive, and it sent a shock of pure warmth through her. Her breath hitched. She responded, her fear finally dissolving. Her own hands moved from his chest to his shoulders, her fingers gripping the thick wool of his coat. She pulled him fractionally closer. The kiss, when it came, was as slow and patient as the snow falling outside. It was a question, not a demand. His lips were firm, cool from the outside air, but they warmed against hers. Their breath mingled, a white plume in the cold air of the lobby. He pulled her down onto the deep velvet sofa in front of the fire, cupping her face. He explored her mouth with a tenderness that belied his reputation. A meticulous, patient worship. They moved to a suite upstairs, their steps measured, their hands linked. The room was cold, but he started a fire in the hearth. The clothes were an obstacle, a formality. They were removed with care, not torn away in haste. A shirt was laid neatly on the back of a chair. A zipper was undone with a steady hand. The focus was not on the skin revealed, but on the trust in their eyes, the unspoken permission in every touch. They slipped under the heavy down comforter, their bodies finally touching. It was a jolt of warmth, of reality. As he moved over her, she felt his control, the tension in his shoulders, as if he were holding back a lifetime of restraint. She put her hand on his arm, her whisper stopping him. "Don't rush," she breathed, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "I want to remember every moment." He visibly relaxed, the tension draining from him. He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw him smile. It was a small, pained, beautiful thing. He lowered his head, not to kiss her mouth, but her forehead, a gesture of profound reassurance. Their lovemaking was a silent conversation, a slow, deliberate discovery. It was warmth after the storm, a sanctuary found, a promise kept. The sun rose over a city transformed, the snow muffling the sounds of Port Argyll into a soft, white stillness. In the suite at the Brass Lantern, the fire had died to embers. Mara was dressed, standing by the window, watching the first plows begin their work on the overpass. Cassian stood behind her, not touching, but his presence was a tangible warmth. "My father's organization was built on the docks," he said, his voice quiet in the morning light. He used the frozen food shipments as a cover for his gray market activities. It was profitable, but it was a liability. "It's time to burn the old ledgers." Mara turned to him. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "I'm converting the entire shipping division into a transparent, fully legitimate logistics company. New name, new books, full compliance. The dirty side of the business dies today." She searched his face, seeing the resolve there. The night they had spent, the intimacy shared, had not been an escape. It had been a catalyst. But for her, it was not enough. "I will not be a part of your life, Aunt Cassian," she said, her voice steady, "if you continue to bleed the people at Pier 12, the protection rackets, the extortion. Those small shops are just like my mother. They're just trying to survive." She set her terms, a line drawn in the new-fallen snow. End it, all of it. Not just the gray market cargo, but the street-level thuggery. Or last night was just a storm. It will not happen again. He met her gaze. He knew what she was asking. It was not just a loss of revenue, it was a perceived surrender, a violation of the old codes. "Agreed," he said, without hesitation. "But it will take time. Contracts must be severed. Men must be retacked. It will be, complicated." "Then make it simple." He did. That afternoon in the Aegis room, he gave the order. "We are pulling out of Pier 12, effective immediately. All collections will cease. All protection contracts are void." The room erupted. His chief of security, a hard, sharp woman named Mira Lupo, slammed her hand on the console. "Sir, this is a catastrophic loss of face. The Novaks are already pushing us. If we pull back, we look weak. They will see it as a surrender. They will walk right in and take the entire district." "They can have it," Cassian said, his voice cold. "It's a losing proposition. The future is in logistics, not in bullying shopkeepers for a few $100s. "It's not about the money, Cassian," Mira shot back, her use of his first name a stark breach of protocol. "It's about the territory. You are giving up our heritage because of a girl." Cassian's gaze turned arctic. "You are dismissed. Mira, all of you, carry out the order." The news hit the street like a tremor. Aiden Pike, furious that he had been outmaneuvered, launched a new, vindictive investigation he dubbed Operation Clean Wake. He leaked to the press that the FBMI was investigating both Valerio and Novak, painting Cassian's withdrawal as a sign of a collapsing criminal empire. The Novaks, exactly as Mira had predicted, saw only weakness. They decided to accelerate Cassian's collapse. That night, a small, professionally set explosive charge detonated at an empty Valerio warehouse on the edge of the pier. The blast was contained, but the fire was visible for miles. It was a message. To drive the point home, they paid a local blogger to post a witness account, blaming the fire on Valerio's internal feuds. The city was on edge. The Gilded Coyote, however, remained an oasis. Cassian had doubled his internal security, but the Novaks were not done. They wanted to prove that even his fortress was vulnerable. It happened at midnight, the peak of the Saturday rush, a flash, a percussive thump, and a cloud of thick, acrid smoke erupted from a steel trash receptacle near the main entrance. It was not a bomb meant to kill. It was an incendiary device, designed to create sheer, unadulterated panic. People screamed. Glassware shattered. A security guard, a young man named Tony, grabbed a fire extinguisher and bravely tried to douse the flames. But the device was packed with chemical accelerants. It flared up violently, engulfing his arm and chest in a flash of white-hot fire. He collapsed, screaming. The crowd surged toward the exits. It was chaos. But Mara moved against the tide. She saw Tony fall. Her EMT training, drilled into her through sheer repetition, took over. She didn't see the crowd. She didn't hear the alarm. She saw a victim. She grabbed a bottle of seltzer from her well, dousing a bar towel, and ran to him. "Get back, everybody, move," she commanded, her voice cutting through the panic with an authority that stunned the people nearest her. She knelt, wrapping the man's burning hand in the wet towel to extinguish it. Her own hands shielded. He was going into shock. "Oi, Val!" she screamed toward the DJ booth. "Call 911. Tell them second-degree burns, chest and left arm, adult male, conscious but in shock." She ripped open his uniform, assessing the damage. She grabbed clean, dry cloths from a busboy's station. "You get me all the ice from my bar, now in a bag." A bystander, mesmerized, was filming the whole thing on their phone. They captured the image of Mara, her face smudged with soot, her knuckles white as she applied pressure to a wound, her voice calm and steady as she spoke to the terrified guard. "Tony, stay with me. You're okay. I've got you. Breathe with me. That's it." By the time the paramedics arrived, Mara had stabilized him. The video was on the morning news. The headline was not about a club fire. It was about the bartender who had run into it. "The Angel of the Coyote," one blogger called her. The narrative shifted. This wasn't just a club girl. This was a hero, a trained EMT who had saved a man's life while the crowd ran. In the Aegis room, Cassian Vale watched the news report on all 12 monitors. The public, so quick to believe he was at war, was now captivated by this act of courage from one of his own. Mira Lupo stood beside him, her arms crossed. "It's a fluke. Good press, but it changes nothing." Cassian turned to her, his eyes alive with a strategic fire she had not seen in years. "You're wrong," he said. "It changes everything. It's the pivot." He turned to his analyst. "Draft the press release. We are accelerating the plan. Announce the full conversion of Valerio shipping into the Port Argyle Trust, a legitimate logistics corporation. And," he added, looking at the footage of Mara, "we are also funding a new grant at St. Helena, a first responders fund for families of emergency workers, effective immediately." It was a brilliant move, using the public's goodwill to cover his full retreat from the criminal underworld. It was also, as he knew it would be, a declaration of war. By cleaning his hands, he was forcing the Novaks into the light, and they were creatures of the dark. They would not come quietly. The Novaks had lost the game of public opinion, so they changed the rules. They reverted to the old ways, the cold ways. Their target was not Cassian. It was his only weakness. The plan was brutally simple. Rosa Quinones was at St. Helena East, a small suburban clinic, for her afternoon dialysis. It was a predictable schedule. The Novaks didn't send thugs. They sent a middle-aged woman who entered the waiting room, signed in as a cousin for another patient, and sat quietly. When the nurse called for Rosa's transport back to the nursing home, the woman stood. "I can take her," she said, smiling. "We're surprising her. Family's in town." The nurse, overworked and grateful for the help, handed over the transport voucher. The woman wheeled Rosa, frail and drowsy from the treatment, out the front door and into a black utility van. The Aegis Room analyst, who had been assigned to passive observation of Rosa, didn't notice the deviation for 4 minutes. The van was supposed to turn left, toward the nursing home. It turned right, toward the highway. "Sir," the analyst's voice was tight with rising panic. "I have a deviation. The asset, Rosa Quinones, is in an unsanctioned vehicle. It's a black van. No plates. Sir, I think we're half a step behind." Cassian was in his office, reviewing the new corporate charters. He didn't look up. Half a step is a lifetime. Where is Mira? "Protecting the coyote, she says the club is the priority. We can't pull the detail on a rumor." "It is not a rumor." Cassian stood. He walked into the Aegis Room, his presence sucking the air out of it. He looked at the map, at the blinking dot of the van heading for the icy bridges. He had a choice, his fortress, his territory, the symbol of his power. Or Mara's mother. It was no choice at all. He hit the all-call button. "All units, all cars, scramble. This is not a drill. We are leaving the coyote. Full abandon-in-place protocol. Converge on my position, now." Mira's voice screamed over the comms. "Cassian, you can't. It's a violation. You're leaving the heart exposed." "The heart has moved," he said, and cut the channel. He was in his sedan, Mara beside him. In less than 2 minutes, he had grabbed her from the bar, his hand on her arm. His only words, "They have your mother." His convoy, 4 black sedans and a reinforced SUV, was a dark arrow cutting through the snow-slowed city. "One of my legitimate businesses is a private EMT service for high-end clients," he said, his voice a low, hard monotone as he drove. "The SUV is an ambulance. When we get close, you're getting in it. They will listen to that." They spotted the van on the I-90 overpass, a snaking, elevated ribbon of ice. Traffic was barely moving. "There," Mara pointed, her voice raw, the black van, stuck in the center lane. "Now," Cassian ordered. He pulled up alongside the ambulance, and she jumped in. He took the lead car. "Mara, I'm on your channel. Talk to me." Her heart was a drum, beating in time with his. She saw his sedan, 2 lanes over, begin to expertly weave through the stalled cars. She grabbed the public address microphone. "This is EMT Unit 301, she shouted, her voice echoing over the frozen bridge, cutting through the hiss of the snow. "Medical emergency, all vehicles, clear the left lane. Clear the left lane now." The effect was immediate. Cars lurched to the right, opening a path. The black van, trapped, saw the ambulance coming and, behind it, Cassian's sedan. The driver panicked, swerving, but it was too late. Cassian's car slid perfectly in front, blocking it. The SUV ambulance boxed it in from the right. It was a bloodless, perfect trap. Executed at less than 10 miles an hour. 2 men burst from the van. Pulling Rosa with them, they used her frail body as a shield. "Back off, Vale, or she dies right here." Mara was out of the ambulance, her hands held high. "Wait, stop!" she screamed. She wasn't talking to them. She was talking to Cassian's men who were emerging from their cars. "No one moves." She walked forward, her EMT training a suit of armor over her terror. "Look at her!" she yelled at the kidnappers. "Look at her arm! That's a dialysis shunt. She just finished treatment. She's hypotensive. Her blood pressure is collapsing right now." The man holding Rosa looked confused. "She's just old, She's in shock," Mara lied, her voice ringing with medical authority. "You keep moving her. You keep her in this cold, and her heart will stop. Do you understand me? She will be dead in 5 minutes. You can't ransom a corpse." The men hesitated. They were hired muscle, not killers. This was supposed to be a simple snatch. Cassian stepped out of his car, calm, his wool coat open. He held up a thick, brown envelope. "This is what you were promised," he said, his voice carrying easily. "This is the ransom. You can have it. Let her go." He tossed the envelope. It landed on the snow at their feet. The leader, his gun still on Rosa. Nudged it with his foot. He bent, grabbed it, and looked inside. It was full of cash. He didn't see the thin, black tracker chip disguised as part of the clasp that Cassian's analyst had activated a moment before. "Go," the man grunted. They shoved Rosa. She stumbled on the ice, and Mara caught her, a bundle of bones in terror. The men scrambled back into the van, reversed, and sped away, taking the next exit. Mara was on her knees on the ice, holding her mother, who was weeping silently. Cassian was beside her, stripping off his own coat and wrapping it around them both. His earpiece crackled. "Sir, we have the tag. They're not going to a safe house. They're heading directly to the Novak primary warehouse at the old shipyard." Cassian knelt, his hand resting on Mara's trembling shoulder. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the cold gray of the sky. "It ends tonight," he promised. 200 yards away, on the parallel service road, Aiden Pike lowered his binoculars. He had his radio in his other hand. He could have called in the tactical team. He could have arrested Cassian Vale, surrounded by his men, in the middle of a clear abduction. But he watched the black van speed away. He watched Cassian's convoy regroup, not fleeing but preparing for a hunt. Pike smiled. Why arrest the lion when the lion could lead him to the entire den? He put his car in gear and followed, at a distance. The Novak warehouse was not a warehouse tonight. It had been draped in white fabric, filled with rented art and overpriced cocktails. It was a pop-up gallery, the sign proclaiming a charity fundraiser for Pier 12 revitalization. It was a lie, a piece of cynical theater, and it was packed with local politicians and minor celebrities, all eager to launder their reputations alongside Novak's. In the back of his darkened sedan, parked 2 blocks away, Cassian watched the feed from a micro-drone. Mara was beside him, Val in the back seat with a laptop. Rosa was safe, secured in the private EMT ambulance with 2 of Cassian's most trusted men, miles away. "They're running their own security, but the system is commercial grade," Val reported, their fingers flying over the keys. "It's sloppy. They have a backup generator, but it's not isolated from the main audio-visual grid." "That's our opening," Cassian said. He looked at Mara. "Are you sure?" "He used my mother," she said, her voice a cold, hard wire. "He put his hands on her. We're not just changing the venue. Cassian, we're burning the stage." The plan was audacious, built not on force but on surgical disruption. Cassian's Aegis team, 12 strong, was already inside, disguised as catering staff and bartenders, their dark suits identical to the events. Val had hacked the DJ's playlist and was about to insert their own track, a high-frequency white noise pulse, embedded beneath a layer of heavy bass. "When I give the signal," Cassian said, "Val will trigger the pulse. It will overload the audio-visual circuits and trip the main power. When the backup generator kicks on, the pulse will hit it again, forcing a system-wide reboot. For 30 seconds, every internal camera will be forced to overwrite its own memory. That's our window." "Aiden Pike is in there," Amara said, watching the drone feed. "He's near the bar." "I know," Cassian said. "He thinks he's bugging the place. He's right, but he's also acting as our witness. He won't let Novak get away, and he won't let me be implicated. He wants the win." Aegis team is in position. The comms in Cassian's ear whispered, "We are a go." "Val, now." Val hit the key. Inside the gallery, the thumping dance music suddenly acquired a deep, vibrating undertone that made the champagne flutes rattle. The massive video screens projecting abstract art flickered. Then, with a loud thud, the entire warehouse went black. Screams, confusion, then the backup generator kicked in, flooding the room with half-light. The music came back on, this time with the piercing, high-frequency pulse audible. The lights flickered again, and the system crashed. Total darkness. "Go," Cassian ordered. The Aegis team moved. In the 30 seconds of chaos, they secured all exits, their movements silent and practiced. When the emergency lights finally came on, Novak was on the central stage, a microphone in his hand, trying to calm the crowd. Cassian and Mara entered through a side door, walking calmly into the panicked room. "It's just a power surge," Novak was shouting, his face slick with sweat. "He's lying." The voice came from the mezzanine above. Mira Lupo stepped into the light, her face a mask of rage. She had a pistol in her hand, aimed not at Novak, but directly at Cassian. You betrayed the family. Cassian, you gave it all away for her." Cassian didn't look at her. He was looking at Mara. Mara had frozen, her eyes wide, staring at a large, decorative mirror on the far wall. In its reflection, she could see Mira, angled, her arm steady, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Down!" Mara screamed, shoving Cassian with all her strength. The sound of the shot was deafening. Cassian fell, not from the bullet, but from her push. The round tore through the air where his head had been, grazing his cheek, a line of sudden, bright fire. He didn't reach for his own weapon. He didn't look up at Mira. He rolled, grabbed the microphone from the panicked DJ, and shouted into the sound system, his voice booming over the speakers. "Everyone stay down, stay on the floor. This is not a drill." "Novak!" another voice yelled. Aiden Pike strode into the center of the room, his badge on a chain around his neck, his gun pointed at the stage. "Marco Novak, you are under arrest for extortion, conspiracy, and the kidnapping of Rosa Quinones." The name hit the room. Kidnapping. The politicians and guests, who'd been frozen, began to stampede. Novak, his face white with rage, grabbed the nearest politician and pulled him back as a human shield. "Nobody moves. You'll shoot a city councilman." His bodyguards formed a wall, but Mara was already moving. "Evacuate," she yelled, using her EMT command voice. "This way to the right, there is a clear exit. Calmly move to the right." She was creating a path, herding the terrified guests away from the stage. Her voice, trained for crisis, was the only one that cut through the panic. The crowd obeyed, surging away, leaving Novak and his men completely exposed. The scuffle was short and brutal. The Aegis team, no longer catering staff, moved as one, disarming and restraining Novak's bodyguards with cold, efficient precision. Novak, his shield gone, threw his hands in the air as Aiden Pike climbed the stage and slammed the handcuffs on his wrists. The flash of a press camera, someone who had snuck in, illuminated the scene. It was over. Cassian got to his feet, his hand pressed to his bleeding cheek. The emergency lights cast long shadows. The room was clearing. He scanned the faces, his heart pounding until he found her. Mara was in a corner, kneeling beside one of the catering staff, one of his men, who'd been grazed by Mira's wild shot. Her hands were covered in blood as she applied pressure to the man's arm. She was shaking, the adrenaline draining away, leaving her pale. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of her. He said nothing. He just took her bloody hands in his grip firm, grounding her, his eyes fixed on hers, said it all. "It's done." She looked past him, up to the mezzanine. It was empty. "She's gone," Mara whispered, her voice trembling. Cassian nodded, his jaw tight. Mira had escaped in the chaos. He squeezed Mara's hand, his gaze never leaving hers. The fight was won, but the war, he knew, was not entirely over. The night did not end in celebration. It ended in the sterile, buzzing quiet of the IATG processing center, smelling of stale coffee and wet wool. Cassian sat on a hard plastic chair, a paramedic finally stitching the graze on his cheek. When his analyst patched through a call to his phone, he put it on speaker. The voice was ragged, distorted by wind. "You washed your hands. Cassian." It was Mira. "But I still have the knife. Get to Pier 12, the loading crane at Yard 4. Come alone. You have 20 minutes, or the DJ pays the price for your betrayal." The line clicked dead. Val. She had grabbed Val. Cassian stood, the paramedic still holding a suture. "I'm fine," he said. He nodded to his Aegis team, who began checking their sidearms. "No." His voice was flat. She said alone. "Like hell," Mara said, stepping directly in his path. She was still covered in dried blood from the wounded caterer. "You don't get to do that. Not anymore. You don't go alone. We started this together, and we are going to finish it together. Aiden Pike, his face a map of exhaustion, walked over. Damn it, Vale, this is a federal crime scene. She's holding a hostage. I have to send my team. Your team goes in. She kills Val, Cashin stated. This isn't a negotiation for her. It's an execution. She wants me. She wants you. She gets us, Mara insisted, her hand on his arm. Pike looked at the resolve on their faces. He sighed, pulling a small, black audio recorder from his coat. Fine. You go. She goes, but you wear this, he said, pressing the recorder into Cashin's hand. It's the only way I can justify holding my tactical team back. I need her confession. I need this done right. Pier 12 was a graveyard of iron. The wind howled off the dark, churning lake, and the sodium lights cast a sick orange glow on the ice-covered ground. High up, on the gantry of the tallest cargo crane, two figures were silhouetted against the storm clouds, Mira, and she had Val in a brutal headlock, a pistol to Val's temple. No closer, Cassian, Mira shrieked, her voice a thin tear in the wind. Cassian stopped, 100 feet from the base. He slowly unbuttoned his wool coat, showing he was unarmed. He raised his hands. Empty. Let Val go. Mira, this is between you and me. It always was, she screamed, her voice cracking with a year's worth of fury. He built this city. Your father built this legacy, this family, and you threw it away. You spat on his name for a bartender. You betrayed us. My father's legacy was a prison, Cashin said, his voice calm, carrying on the wind. I'm free. Then you'll die free. She shoved Val to the deck and leveled the pistol, her hand shaking, at Cassian's heart. But Mara was gone. She had slipped into the shadows the moment they arrived. She knew this place. Her mother had worked these docks. She remembered the machinery, the safety protocols. While Mira monologued, Mara was climbing, hand over icy rung, up the crane's technical ladder. She reached the dark, vibrating control cabin. She didn't need the key. She knew where the manual brake was, a long, red, heavy lever. Just as Mira's finger tightened, just as she exhaled to take the shot, Mara threw her entire body weight onto the lever. With a sound like a metal banshee, the crane's hydraulic brakes seized. The entire gantry lurched violently. Mira was thrown off balance, her feet slipping on the icy deck. The shot went wide, a harmless spark disappearing into the night sky. The shriek of the brake was the signal. Sirens erupted. IATG vans and city police cruisers flooded the pier, their blue and red lights turning the icy yard into a chaos of flashing color. Val scrambled away. Mira, disoriented, was surrounded before she could even raise her arm again. The last threat was neutralized. The betrayal was over. Aiden Pike cuffed Mira himself. He walked over to Cassian, who was already wrapping his coat around a shivering Val. Pike stopped, looking at the man who had been his white whale. You're a mess, Vale, Pike said. My superiors got their arrests. Novak is done. She's done. He nodded toward Cashin's bloody cheek. You're clean enough to live with, and just dirty enough for me to be grateful you were on my side tonight. It was not forgiveness. It was a truce, as gray and fragile as the Port Argyle dawn. The next day, Cashin held a press conference. He announced the full and permanent dissolution of all Valerio security contracts. He was establishing the Pier 12 Trust, a multi-million-dollar community fund managed by an independent law firm to revitalize the district. He named Mara Quinones as the community co-founder, her heroic actions and unwavering moral compass, serving as the fund's inspiration. That night, they were at the Brass Lantern. The vast, century-old ballroom was empty, dark, lit only by the massive fireplace. He stood in the center of the room. She walked to him, her steps echoing on the polished floor. The cut on his cheek was a stark red line, the first scar of his new life. She raised her hand, her fingers gently tracing the wound. This one, she whispered, is real. He caught her hand, turning it over, and pressed his lips to her palm. No more one-way glass. Mara. He pulled her close. From a speaker he had placed on the mantel, soft jazz began to play. A quiet ghost in the vast room. They began to move. A slow, simple dance. He held her as if she were the only anchor in the world. She rested her head on his chest, closing her eyes, listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. He tilted her chin up. The kiss was deep, a slow, unfolding warmth that started in her chest and spread to every part of her. It was not a kiss of frantic passion, but of profound, unshakable recognition. His hands were firm on her waist, hers laced around his neck. They parted, but only slightly, their foreheads resting against each other. They just breathed, sharing the same air. Their shared future held in the quiet, respectful, and absolute trust in each other's eyes. Rosa Quinones received her transplant 3 weeks later. Her name moved to the top of the list, paid for by the first legal disbursement of the new trust, and in the basement of the Gilded Coyote. Cassian and Mara opened a free first aid certification class for any night shift worker in the city. Their love, forged in surveillance and the shadows, had become what Port Argyle needed most: a safe harbor, a steady light at the end of a very dark street. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts and say hello. Please subscribe to Mafia Boss Story, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by even more listeners.